Welcome to Hip Hop Movie Club, the show that harmonizes the rhythm of hip hop with the magic of movies. Today we're discussing episode 2 of the 2019 Wu-Tang Clan documentary Of Mics and Men. We're three old heads who put their old heads together to vibe on these films for you. I'm Dino Wright, podcaster, filmmaker, longtime hip hop fan, and I love Jamie Foxx's impression of Dave Chappelle saying Wu-Tang!
I'm JB, 80s and 90s nostalgia junkie, longtime hip-hop fan, and hey, you, get off my cloud. You don't know me and you don't know my style.
Nice. I'm Boogie, a DJ, longtime hip-hop fan, and I still own my original Protect Your Neck and Into the Wu-Tang cassettes from when they originally dropped.
Nice.
Oh, bonus. And if you know your hip-hop history, you also know it dropped on the same day as that Into the Wu-Tang. I own that on cassette as well.
Midnight Marauders.
Boom. Boom.
Nice.
Amazing.
In this episode, the Wu-Tang Clan rose to fame on their own terms. We'll answer the question, how did they do it? And please hit that subscribe button down below so you won't miss an episode.
Episode 2 of Wu-Tang Clan Of Mics and Men chronicles the group's meteoric rise following the release of Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. It also highlights RZA's revolutionary business model, allowing members to pursue solo deals while maintaining the collective, which would lead to breakthrough albums from Method Man, ODB, and others.
Here are 5 things you need to know about episode 2 of Mics and Men and how Wu-Tang rose to fame. Number 1, RZA and the Wu-Tang Style. RZA took his disillusionment with the record industry, their economic conditions in Staten Island, his new lease on life, and conceived the group on their own do-it-yourself terms, including takeaway number 2, Wu-Tang's revolutionary business model. The Wu-Tang Clan revolutionized hip-hop, not just with their music, but with their business model, influencing artists' approach, ownership, and distribution. Number 3, the breakthrough, dropping the Cream video and the Wu-Tang Enter the 36 Chambers album, both built in their DIY style, on consecutive days launched the group to stardom. Number 4, the management team, Wu-Tang's street-savvy management team of Mook, Mike McDonald, and Power were the backbone that allowed the group to focus on their music. And number 5, their uniqueness and cultural influence. Wu-Tang's authenticity, street cred, and unique lineup of multiple talented MCs was a new concept and sound, endearing themselves to fans hungry for a new angle of hip-hop, leading to a lasting cultural phenomenon not just in music, but in fashion and language.
Right on. So episode 2 picked up right where we left off on episode 1 and kind of talked about their meteoric rise. As you mentioned, Dinah Wright, the first takeaway, RZA and the Wu-Tang Style. So after RZA was disillusioned with the record industry, they soured on Tommy Boy Records, both he and the Genius. And with his new lease on life, he helped conceive this group on the do-it-yourself terms. Like, they just refused to conform. And said, we're going to do it our way with this whole crew, driving up their confidence level, and said, we could actually do this. Give me 1 year of your life, I think was what he said, and we'll see what we can do. And history speaks for itself. Boogie, you want to take us through a little bit more about how this formed and took off?
Yeah, absolutely. Just, touching on, RZA, had just gotten back from Ohio, and he had this great awakening, and as you mentioned, he had a sour dud of a run with Tommy Boy Records, on which he signed his deal at 18, releasing a mediocre single, Ooh, I Love You, Rakim. They actually played the clip of that. Mm-hmm. And he also mentioned how, Jizza was signed with Cold Chillin', and both talked about how they were trying to be kind of forced to go commercial and talk about stuff that wasn't, authentic about who they really were. And because of that, they didn't actually buy into it. And of course, when you don't buy into your own self, you fail. And both of them didn't have any success with those. But RZA made his house almost like home base. He said the guys were all out doing their own thing. And as they all mentioned, they had, different, outside activities. Most of it, revolved around, selling drugs and hustling on the street just to try to make ends meet. But, whatever you're doing, after that, get over here. I'm going to throw some beats down, and you guys get on here and just do what you got to do, and just keep working on it and keep working on it. And as you mentioned, his catchphrase was like, "Yo, give me 1 year of your lives." If it doesn't work, go back to doing what you're doing. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. And they actually, bought into it. And it was just, I think it was more so that fact that what he was speaking, he believed what he was speaking. And because he believed what he was speaking, he spoke with the conviction, and that rubbed off on the other guys, and it got them to start, the hustling as far as putting out their music, or, writing their rhymes, and, working on their pen game. One guy they mentioned who had a really strong pen game was Inspector Deck. And he was, the leadoff man. And he said, "Hey, listen, if Dex will get in, you can't go behind him writing something whack. You got to put something out dope, because he's going to bring it," And, they just basically just kept, grinding and grinding and grinding, and not taking no for an answer once they got themselves to the point where they were ready to go pursue a deal. They weren't just going to conform. They wanted something that was going to be theirs. They wanted that non-exclusive deal, where they can have their own Wu-Tang production. Each guy, they have the group as a conglomerate, and then if anybody else wanted to go off on their own and make their own deal, they would have the freedom to do so.
Yeah, I picked up. I love what you said there about Inspector Deck having the pen game, and that friendly competition was awesome, because you see them sitting there talking about it, and it's like sometimes someone will be in the studio spitting the bars that they wrote, and it's like they would interrupt, like, "Well, look what I got. Well, look what I got," and they wanted to almost one up the other guy, and that obviously breeds excellence when you have a little bit of that friendly competition. So that was awesome. Yeah, RZA had the business sense. He was seeking out offers, and he was the one that coming back to the group saying, "Well, we have this on the table, this table," but like you said, he ensured that they had creative control and do it their own way. Like you said, DIY. Dino, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
They got burned by doing it someone else's way, and so they thought, well, let's do it our way then.
Exactly. Which takes us nicely into the next takeaway, was the revolutionary business model, just to kind of talk a little bit more in detail about what that meant. I mean, Boogie already hit on it. It's like, okay, we will have this deal, but we're going to ensure that we have creative control in terms of, yes, our group is signed to this deal, but every individual could negotiate with whatever label they want. And they had, at one point, they had multiple people signing at different labels. And it was almost like, I think Method Man was like, this was unprecedented. This is like, we're just almost like having labels that would literally be at each other's throat competing, but they have guys from Wu-Tang. So they were kind of collaborating and speaking with each other. Yeah.
I said it directly, that instead of them competing against each other, they work together for the Wu-Tang's benefit. And that was unheard of.
Yeah. It's wild. Yeah. Yeah. So as long as they had that control, you see a lot of different record executives in here. And Steve Rifkin, who was the CEO of Loud Records, was very instrumental in getting them signed. And Sophia Chang really was super impressed by RZA as a person and how he presented himself. Like you said, Boogie, he had a lot of conviction, and he was professional, and they remain friends to this day. I mean, they were very aggressive and took that initiative. They got their video to Ralph McDaniels. We've talked about him multiple times on our show here. Mm-hmm. Video Music Box legend, right? And you saw his
Ralph.
whole exactly. You saw his whole basement full of like VHS tapes and whatnot. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I know one thing that I mentioned. I quote what Sophia was saying. She was impressed with RZA, and she was the former A&R at Jive Records, which was a major record company, but she knew that they couldn't sign them. She said nobody was signing a non-exclusive deal. It was like, once you sign a group, you automatically got the artists if they wanted to do any individual project. So she was like, they couldn't do it, And it wasn't even a slight against them. It was just like, the label wouldn't even go for it. But I like how Steve Rifkin approached them. It's like he heard them freestyling on the Stretch and Bobito show, and it's like, he knew that from listening to that them on there, that they didn't have individual contracts. And I know he was originally said he was seeking out Method Man, and RZA was like, no, he already had the pieces in place. Like, Method Man's going to go over here to Def Jam, and working with Dante Ross, like, for Dante Ross A&R for Elektra. It's like, I think I might put ODB over there with Elektra. And it's like, wow, he's like trying to figure out the pieces of the puzzle. But before, I think even before that, he was saying that, he was reaching out to RZA. He said he was calling him for like weeks on end and nobody was responding. And then finally, RZA just showed up with the whole clan and to the studio and said, hey, look, to the label and said, hey, I got the guys here. You want to meet them? He said, yeah, come on in, guys. And then he's like, talk about this long table. And he was all that, sitting around the table with the guys. And then they all just started freestyling for him. But like, he knew at that moment that, he had something special. And because he was kind of starting from the ground up too, was kind of, mom and pop shop, record label. He gave them that deal. He said, listen, I'll give you that deal. But, if somebody gives you an offer, I got first dibs. Like I can compete. I can see if I can match it first.
Yeah, rights, yeah.
Right. If I can match it, then, I'll sign you. But if I can't, then, best wishes. And that was just like, wow. And he kind of he gave him free reign. He's like, you guys can kind of, do what you got to do. And they just, the rest is kind of history from there, It's like amazing.
Yeah, I was in awe of. It's almost like they had these guys on like marionette puppet strings. It's like they're so dope that they're like, all right, you go to that label, you go to that label. Well, we're gonna do it this way, and everybody's just head spinning. Like, wait, how do we corral this group? But we can't. You just can't control it.
Yeah, but then Uncle Ralph, that whole story was funny. I mean, he said, RZA just kind of showed up with the tape. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, I got a video for you. Mm-hmm. They popped it in and they looking at it and he's like, can you play it? He's like, yeah, I'll play it. Just take it back and, we can clean it up and everything. He's like, no, you can play it like that. You can play it like that. It's got the time code on it. It's like,
yeah.
And it's funny because I remember the very first time I saw the video, I was like, this is a low budget video. Like, what the heck is this? It's like fuzzy and like shaky with a camcorder. The time code was on it. It was shifting from color to black and white. And I'm like, what is going on? But then I'm like listening to what they're saying. I'm like, yo, these dudes are dope, but heck, this video is low budget.
It goes to show you content is king.
Yeah, because it was so dope. Like, I mean, like, you just forget the fact that it was a low budget video because they were spitting. And it was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And like, hey, like I mentioned, like that cassette single dropped and I was right at McCorvey's to get it. Right downtown.
That's wild. Yeah, and then that leads us into takeaway number 3, the breakthrough. When they dropped that Cream video, and then Wu-Tang entered the 36 Chambers album, built in their own style on consecutive days, and that was just, it caught like wildfire, and that really launched the group to start. And they were talking about the numbers as like, I don't know if it was sales, but it's like, okay, we're at 50,000, 100,000, 150,000. We're like a million, like in no time. And they're like, oh, okay. This is something.
Went from, they made gold record pretty quickly. And then after that, they went platinum pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Moving units.
Unprecedented. Yep.
And they did it with such, they produced the album in his house. They didn't really go to a studio for this. It sounds very DIY, like it sounds like lo-fi almost.
Yeah.
The production is not what you'd expect from like a major label rap group. So the fact that they did it and they did it their way and it sounds the way it sounds and we loved it anyway, it's a testament to they were right. They were right about doing it their way.
Yeah. He was like, shout out to RZA's mom. Like, she welcomed us in the house and then she put us out. He was out on the deck.
Great story they told about that. Yeah.
He was out on the deck with the mic with the long cord running over to the RZA, and he's with the music and they out on the deck rhyming. Like, that's crazy. It's so crazy.
I literally put them closer to the street. and that fed into it. I think that was an important part of it.
Yeah. And he said,
It was that rawness, the grittiness, right?
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was
Literally on their balcony.
not manufactured in like a lavish studio. They did talk about Firehouse Studios too, but that was just a step up. That was a tiny little studio with bare bones equipment. They're like, I had some nice stuff in there, but it wasn't anything that the big time players were using.
I mean, it worked for Audio 2, and DOS Effects came out of all those rap groups. The MC Light, they recorded their stuff at Firehouse Studios, so they're doing something right.
That's true.
Yeah. They probably were just doing a lot of mastering over there as well, because they had the raw audio from RZA's house.
Yeah,
probably doing a lot of mostly mastering over there. Some studio background, cleaning up stuff over there,
but not much.
Yeah, not much, right?
It really is like a American dream. Like it's kind of like the hood type dream. Like a bunch of friends that are just hanging out, they're hustling, they're doing, they're smoking, they're drinking, and they're just singing about their life, and they had that belief in themselves, and they're like, we're gonna hit it. And I love to see that confidence level grow, and they could tell the breakthrough was coming. And it's like there's a lot of that. Sounds cliche, but like the power of positive thinking, like you said, RZA rallied troops. Give me a year, and they put in the work. And they stayed true to themselves, and good things happen in a lot of cases. And that happens.
Yep. All it takes is one crazy friend with an idea.
Yeah, that's right.
But
it was so unique too because of the size of the crew and the different styles and the rawness and authenticity. The common refrain we keep seeing in these first couple episodes was like, "What is this? Like, what is this?" Like, people were hungry for that unique style because, like you said, people were doing similar things. It was kind of like, you get the pop crossover thing, you get the West Coast violence, you get some of these sugar coated things, and then it's like, wow, these guys are like street but beautiful. It's hard to describe. It was just
right. Like you look at how, like, we use NWA for instance, and we all know that Cube did a lot of writing for them. So you could tell, even when it's not Cube rhyming, it still has Cube's flow. Mm-hmm. Like these guys, they all did their own. They had their own unique styles, their own unique cadences and flows. So, I mean, like, you'd hear one guy rapping, and then you get a totally different delivery with the next guy. Yep. It wasn't like one guy wrote everybody's rhyme. The only thing that changes is the voice. Everything was completely different.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like a super crew of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally in size and in delivery. They were a good counterpoint to even what else is happening in New York, which is the jazzier stuff, Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul, Native Tongues kind of thing, and then the other movements in hip hop at the time, like the West Coast sound, and it was a different kind of urban and gritty and raw and authentic. Authenticity always wins.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially in hip hop.
Even those other ones are authentic too, but you talked about JB, like more poppy kind of rap stuff, and that did sell records too. But some people will bounce back and forth between, if they want the more pop type hip hop, or the rest of America wants something more authentic.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. This is the real deal. The next takeaway is, it took a management team to really push this forward and get it out to the masses. And they had such a great street savvy management team. And it was kind of because they did not have that true business education. A lot of it was a trial and error, but it worked because they were relentless, just like the Wu-Tang Clan themselves. They just kept pushing forward. And it was like Mook, who we talked about last time, and Mike McDonald got engaged, not the guy from Dewey Brothers, and Power.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine? Yeah. But that was a formidable trio there.
Yeah, they did different things to get their music out there, and they got a little luck too. So Steve Rifkin tells a story about how all 9 of the MCs were in there, and no one can seem to remember who it was or knew who it was, said, "That's it." And that's they had this buzz that no one could put their finger on. And that was a really great story about how like another validation of what RZA was doing, because people they didn't know were shouting them out.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy. I love that story. I was cracking up. He's like, I think I might have gotten got. I don't know. And then Moose like, I don't know who that was. it's like, wait a minute. That was cool though. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to put something out for the streets, it's always, good to get some street validation right out the gate.
Yeah. There's a similar story in the first episode, and I think these are kinds of things that successful stories like this like need to have. You got to break out of your circles and find a greater acceptance.
Right.
It worked for they got it.
And all of them had a hustler's mentality.
Mm-hmm.
They all in various stages probably were, doing some hustling. And I think out of all of them, the only one who had any kind of knowledge of how the industry worked was Mike McDonald. Last, he was the only one. Everyone else was kind of like, hey, we learning kind of as we go. Even Mike was learning as he was going, because they didn't know what was going to happen. They just it seemed like a good idea, and everybody kind of backed him. Power, shows up with a shoebox full of cash. It's like ready to invest in. Ready to invest into the creation of the album, and because of that, he's the exec producer of it. He fronted all that money out of his pocket. He's like, hey, it's better than doing what I was doing. This is seems more worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows where that's going to go, but this can go anywhere. This is positive. This is legit. This can legitimize it. And I think Meth even said something along the lines when he was on stage at one of the shows. He said, I come from where you guys were. We're out here just we're trying to make our money legit. We're trying to do this the legit way. We don't want to have nothing to do with any nonsense that's going on, any rumors that's going around. We out here trying to do this legit. That's all we want to do. We want to make money legitimately. And, it worked. It worked.
Yeah, and you said they had the hustler mentality, not only street hustling, but like they literally had that drive and determination. They pounded the pavement. They were doing 2 to 3 shows a day, like spreading the word, get out there. So they say sometimes they'd have a show earlier in Brooklyn and then head down to Philly or vice versa, and then maybe even a third show on certain days. So they were like burning the midnight oil and like nonstop, gaining momentum, getting these crowds. And I like how the people at the shows were giving shout outs to people and like kind of like endeared them to the crowd. Like, hey, I can give a shout out to my boyfriend, my girlfriend, to this person, and they were beloved. Yep.
Yeah. We saw some familiar faces in the crowd too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wow, look at that. You got, so it's Dot X and
Drez was there from Black
Dress and Buckshot Shorty from Black Moon. There's a couple, it's cool when you're getting some validation from MCs that are already cemented in the game.
Yeah.
That means you're doing something right.
From the West Coast, they were coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing something right when you're getting respect from them guys already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the final takeaway is like we hit upon this already, but the uniqueness and like the cultural influence, the authenticity we mentioned, street cred, and the unique lineup of all the multiple talented MCs, something we had never seen before. And people were thirsty for that. Like we said, the new angle of hip hop.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit more about that, Boogie? Like it led to like the whole movement. It wasn't just about the songs. It was like Wu-Tang. It's like
it definitely wasn't. I mean, Havoc probably said it best. Havoc, from Mobb Deep said it best. Because you could hear the truths in their lyrics. And then he came back around later and said they were successful. They were the most successful because they were masters at expressing their pain.
That was a really great quote. Yeah.
I was like, wow. You think about it, and it's like, yeah, because even Seth Rogen touched on it a little bit too. He said, they listened to that album over and over and over again, and especially Cream. He said, it's one of the saddest songs you've ever heard.
Yeah.
But even the melody of it, the whole tone of it was sad, but I listened to it over and over and over. And it's like the first eye-opening experience and the first realization of, what's going on out in the streets. And it's like, I think that carried them, the authenticity of their sound and the way they expressed themselves and being vulnerable. Method Man, they gave a little background. He told a little background of how he ended up in Staten Island and what he had to go through. living in the shelter for battered women. As his mother at certain times would leave his father. They move the family with or without the father, and sometimes without the father, they end up in a different shelter, and then finally they ended up in one in Brooklyn. And when they left there, they ended up living with a lady named Umi, who ran the shelter, and she actually lived in Staten Island. And he come from Long Island, and from Long Island to living in the hood in Staten Island it's like night and day. He wasn't used to that, but he had to adjust, and because of that, that change and that adjustment, he's able to put that into words. And then, we had ODB's wife, Iceline Shakita Jones, giving a little background on how her and ODB had to struggle early throughout their lives, and how he helped her, gain her confidence and her self-worth through the teachings of the nations of gods and earths. But yeah, it's, even you, God, told us about how he was in jail when the first, in the beginning, and how he had to get out and play catch up basically to everyone else. And even Inspector Deck was on parole for something, and how when they were trying to first get out there, he had to work with his parole officer. And he said, luckily, his parole officer would let him travel as long as he kept him abreast of what was going on, and making sure that he was doing something right. Like, he wasn't just traveling just to transport drugs. No, he was traveling because he was joining the rap group, and he was trying to make a legit way for himself. And the parole officer worked with him. So all of these different things, these life experiences they went through, they were able to put it into their lyrics, and they kept them grounded to the street, even though they were gaining they were gaining so much success and going into another stratosphere of success. They were staying grounded. They would always come back home. As you've seen various clips throughout the episode 1, and even this episode, they were hanging out in the neighborhood, basically living life and talking about their experiences. It's like, can't get any better than that. You can go back home and still get respect.
Yeah.
Don't get much better than that.
I enjoyed those personal stories behind the scenes that you mentioned. It was great. And Method Man was actually shouting out some of his childhood friends that were in the shelter, and he was like, I don't know if you remember me, but if you're watching this, hey, Sean, and I forget the other guys' names, and he was like, man,
Wayne and Ronnie.
There you go, Wayne and Ronnie. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. It's like, I hope they were watching that show.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah,
so dope.
Yeah, that was. Speaking about vulnerability, I mean, and the ODB put his welfare card on his album cover for his solo album. And I remember when that one came out, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, that is insane. And people thought it was almost like a joke. Like, they're like, oh, we all love ODB because they compared him like Flavor Flav, like a clown jester, just like a joker. But man, he was authentic. And he was like, I don't care about paper, money. You guys, like, the government's trying to get us to fight over paper. Like, I collect my welfare. This is how I get paid, right? This is me. This is me in the raw, back to authenticity. So to show that, it was like his wife was like, "You really are? You can put your welfare card on there."
Yeah,
I think what it is.
Younger me, when I first saw that, I was cracking up. I was like, "This guy, man!" But I think as I got older, I appreciated him for that.
Yeah.
I was like, "Wow, that was." Yeah, I can't knock that.
It's a bold move, and
yeah,
there's meaning to it.
Yeah, started from the bottom.
Yeah, kind of like a protest type.
Yeah, it's
metaphorical.
Holding up a mirror to society, which is what all good art does. Lots of good art comes from pain, and the line about masters of expressing pain was just so good. I'm so glad they included this because it was really important to the story.
One other interesting tidbit I picked up is how they got the word cream. The acronym cream. It was Method Man had the friend Raider Ruckus, who was in jail, and they used to exchange letters. And Raider Ruckus had written at almost like a postscript or footnote, like, cream, cash rules everything around me. And he's like, oh, what? And then he's singing it. Wow, this is dope. When they start trying to record that, it's like, this is it. This is dope right here.
Well, the song needed a hook, and Method Man was usually the one that had the good hooks. And so that was the hook he brought.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Yeah, you got, you got 64 hot bars a piece from Deck and Ray with no hook.
Yeah.
You can't put back-to-back 64 bars of heat with no hook in between.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People gonna be like, "What is this?"
If nothing else, this episode's a great recounting of the origin of cash rules everything around me. Because they also use they show the melody from the Charmels, as long as I've got you. Which is a
Yes,
really wonderful song.
yes,
If you haven't actually listened to the actual song, that hook is only the first 5 seconds. The rest of the song is terrific, and they use it at the end too, when they talk about you God and the Shun getting shot and recovering.
hmm
It's a really good, and I don't know if RZA thought this far ahead. Maybe he did, but the message of the actual song is that as long as I've got you, everything's gonna be okay. And it was really a nice kind of summary of Wu-Tang, the collective. Even though everyone has these solo deals from other record labels, they had each other in this collective. Except for ODV, they're all still there. They're all still
Yeah.
alive,
Yeah.
which really says something. 25 plus years later.
It's true.
Yeah. One thing that I did, one piece that I actually did appreciate too, was Prince Paul.
Yeah.
Prince Paul, he kind of explained the whole business model a little bit, and explain how the artists were basically signed to the production company, which is in essence what happened here with Wu-Tang Productions, with the RZA. And then RZA the production company goes to the label, which is going to Loud. And then they get the deal, and then they kind of work that way. But on the flip side, he was talking about how, the production company, they got to get paid first, of course, and then the artist. And he was talking about how it kind of can lead to issues. And he explained how that can happen because a lot of times the artists are left wondering why they're not getting paid the equal amount as another artist that's on in the same group as them. In this case, would be the RZA. But it's basically because RZA owns the company, and he's getting paid twice in a sense, if you want to look at it that way. And it may not be twice, but some fraction of it. He's getting paid for having the production company, and he's getting paid as an artist. So it's not going to be equal. And it kind of made me think of something that we touched on this similar topic before in Straight Outta Compton, because we see how when Eazy-E had Ruthless Records and NWA was signed to Ruthless Records, and that kind of led to a lot of discord within the group as well, because it's like, hey, Eazy's getting paid more than once. Everybody's working for Eazy instead of Eazy being on the same level as them. And I was like, wow. It's like when he was talking to him in my head, I'm like, we saw this before. And I was like, the first thing that popped in my head was like NWA, Straight Outta Compton. I was like, wow. I was like, another kind of full circle moment tying into something that we already covered.
It's important to know your rights as an artist. The whole De La Soul thing that we talked about, that stuff was locked up forever. Industry rule number 4080. That's right. Yep. So I give RZA a lot of credit for standing his ground. We're doing it on our own terms. Here's what's going to happen. We have creative control. We're not going to give in. We're not going to change our style. We're one crew, and you can sign us, but we have the rights to negotiate with other companies as soloists.
Hip Hop Movie Club is produced by your HHMCs, JB, Boogie, and Dino Wright. Theme music by Boogie. Join us on April 24th at the Frank Banco Ale House Cinemas at Steel Stacks in Bethlehem, PA, for a screening of Hustle and Flow in 4K starring Terrence Howard and Ludacris. Tickets at steelstacks.org. As always, check out our full live event schedule on our website, hiphopmovieclub.com. Thanks for watching the Hip Hop Movie Club show. Ring the bell so you get notified when we post new content. It's the sound of a power-up for us, so thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more where that came from. Hit the thumbnail that's about to come on the screen.
And remember, don't hate, resonate.
Resonate.
Resonate with your friends or family.
Wu-Tang's forever. Resonate.
Right.
I couldn't help it. Oh, man. Oh, jokes write themselves.